Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Brain repository. Please don't nitpick the details too much. Lose your brain, and you can enjoy happiness. In the US, within a room filled with high-tech elements, numerous individuals with extraordinary temperaments walked around. Researchers, wearing glasses and looking highly knowledgeable, walked shoulder to shoulder, constantly muttering various incomprehensible terms. Apart from the refined researchers, the remaining personnel were all capable and serious. Throughout the entire hall, everyone was extremely serious, and everyone had their own tasks to complete. Except for one person. That kid Tony Stark really has women on both arms. When can I be rich enough to do that? A voice, highly out of sync with the overall atmosphere, came from a workstation. Throwing the Playboy magazine onto the desk, Su Xing leaned back into his chair. Bored, Su Xing stared at the S.H.I.E.L.D. eagle emblem before him, his eyes filled with the numbness of a working man. Oh heavens! I never thought I couldn't escape the fate of being a working man no matter where I went. In his previous life, Su Xing worked overtime for a salary, not getting much good sleep for an entire month straight. Facing the penalty of dock performance if he took leave, Su Xing chose to tough it out. Then, as expected, he died. In a blink of an eye, he arrived on S.H.I.E.L.D's helicarrier. As Su Xing integrated his memories, he realized he had transmigrated into the body of a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Coincidentally, this agent also died from overwork, and his name was also Su Xing. Su Xing was extremely excited when he heard the sound of a system awakening in his ear. After many years of hardship, a web novel plot actually happened to him. Still reeling from the excitement of the system awakening, Su Xing's excitement paused for a moment when he saw the system's name. For no other reason than Su Xing's system was named 8-Hour Workday System. The 8-Hour Workday System, as the name suggests, meant working only 8 hours from the start of work to the end of work. As long as he clocked in on time every day and clocked out on time, he would receive system rewards and his abilities would improve. Perhaps as compensation, this system had an extremely special mechanism. That was clocking in and out on time, and absolutely no overtime. Clocking in 1 minute early or clocking out 1 minute late would cause the system to directly revoke that day's reward and cancel the next day's clock in. After understanding the system's content, Su Xing couldn't help but complain. You say it's humane, but it still makes you go to work. You say it's inhumane, but it doesn't let you work overtime. If you work even 1 second of overtime, it gets angry with you. However, what Su Xing complained about the most was another matter. S.H.I.E.L.D. actually had a clock-in process for work. In Su Xing's previous life's understanding, weren't special units like agents supposed to work all year round until they died? How could there be such a thing as getting off work? But when Su Xing thought about how even Western armies in his previous life got holidays, he felt this matter wasn't difficult to explain. Many times, things that seem self-evident are not necessarily so. How did that saying go? You talk reason to life, and it talks reality to you. Considering that it might also be due to his insignificant position and insufficient rank, in a large S.H.I.E.L.D., his presence didn't add much, and his absence didn't subtract much, Su Xing felt relieved. However, precisely because of this, Su Xing was happy to be idle. Where isn't work, anyway? Normally, besides helping S.H.I.E.L.D. with some petty tasks, for the rare major missions, Su Xing only went through the motions. Relying on the system's rewards, Su Xing was at ease during missions, often completing them early and clocking out on time. After completing missions, S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't care, letting agents arrange their time as long as it wasn't too excessive and didn't delay the next mission. It was precisely because of this that Su Xing could sit at his workstation reading Playboy magazine to pass the time. As he read, Su Xing started to zone out. Thinking of Agent Coulson, who devoted himself to his duty until death in the movies, Su Xing felt a wave of emotion. In the movie, when Tony had just returned from the cave, built his armor, completed his revenge, and had not yet announced his identity, Coulson had already come knocking, expressing his desire to talk to Tony about the armor. When Thunder God Thor, who had been banished to the mortal realm, was preparing to secretly lift Mjolnir, and Hawkeye, guarding the site, wanted to shoot him unconscious with an arrow, it was also Coulson who stopped Hawkeye. Even when ambushed by Loki and near death, Coulson, with his mortal body, still managed to shoot Loki once. And in his last moments before death, he advised the Avengers to unite. Thinking of this, Su Xing couldn't help but sigh. Alas, heroes are just like that, I suppose. But don't expect Su Xing to learn from Coulson. Su Xing raised his listless eyes and looked at the clock. A smile reappeared on his tired face, worn out from work. Good. Only 1 hour left until quitting time. A nap would bring him right to the time. Su Xing picked up the Playboy magazine from the desk and placed it over his face. In his previous life, he worked overtime until he died. In this life, he would never choose to work overtime again, no matter what. Besides, the system was right here. Overtime had clearly marked penalties. It wasn't that he didn't want to work overtime. During work hours, he was an agent, a hero who saved people and fought evil. But after work, he was just an ordinary working man who had worked all day, completely unrelated to the word hero. Furthermore, in the Marvel Universe, which world-destroying major event hadn't been stopped by the superheroes? It was the same whether he was there or not. Thinking of this, Su Xing closed his eyes. The most important thing before him now was to do his job steadily, clock out steadily, and steadily improve his abilities, so that he wouldn't just be a cannon fodder extra in big scenes and disappear. That would be good enough. After all, the Avengers had the world in their hearts. Regarding the deaths of small individuals, even if the heroes wished to help, they were powerless. Thinking of this, Su Xing contentedly reclined his chair and began to sleep. Just as Su Xing had settled his mind and was about to fall asleep, a voice came out. "Nice chair." Su Xing instantly sobered up. As someone who had executed multiple missions and was no longer the white who had just transmigrated, Su Xing immediately recognized whose voice it was. Su Xing instinctively stood up and saluted. "Director." A holographic projection appeared before Su Xing. With a fierce expression and an eye patch over one eye, it was indeed Nick Fury. Nick Fury's image looked at Su Xing and said faintly, "If my sense of time isn't mistaken, it should still be working hours, Agent Su Xing." Su Xing's expression was serious. "Director, the mission assigned to me by the organization has been completed. According to my employment contract, I have the right to rest as long as it doesn't interfere with my work." Upon hearing Su Xing's words, Nick Fury's heart was instantly filled with speechlessness. Nick Fury had a deep impression of this agent, partly due to Su Xing's rare Asian name. On the other hand, it was due to Su Xing's outstanding performance during his duties. For the missions Nick Fury assigned to Su Xing, he always managed to complete them excellently in a very short time. His abilities were superb. And beyond his excellent abilities, what impressed Nick Fury the most was this agent's quirk. He always clocked in precisely on time and clocked out precisely on time, showing no initiative for missions. However, due to Su Xing's abilities, no major problems had occurred so far. Clocking out on time also hadn't affected normal duty, so Nick Fury didn't want to say much about it. But today was different. Nick Fury assigned a mission to Su Xing. According to reliable intelligence, a group of terrorists is going to attack Tony Stark, the owner of Stark Industries. Your mission is to rescue Tony Stark during this operation. The terrorists will attack after Tony Stark's weapon demonstration ends. More details have been sent to you. Check them yourself. Su Xing listened to Nick Fury's voice and began to look at the mission details. Although his expression was calm, his heart was greatly fluctuating. Rescue Tony now? Shouldn't Tony only enter S.H.I.E.L.D's radar after developing the armor? Besides, why was this mission just coincidentally assigned to him? Su Xing thought of this and helplessly frowned. It didn't matter. He was just a working man. Everything obeyed the organization's arrangements. But putting all that aside, did Nick Fury forget something? Nick Fury looked at Su Xing's furrowed brows, believing he had an opinion on the difficulty of this mission. So he spoke. "Agent, according to observation, this group of terrorists are not professionals. Based on the assessment of your abilities, you are fully capable of handling this mission alone. So don't have too much psychological pressure." Nick Fury hadn't finished speaking when he saw Su Xing shake his head, interrupting his reassurance. "Director, my psychological pressure isn't due to the mission's difficulty, but due to a problem you might have overlooked." Under Nick Fury's puzzled gaze, Su Xing turned his head to look at the clock. According to the contract, I have 40 minutes left until I get off work. Even though Nick Fury had experienced many things, dealt with many excellent agents, and seen the quirks of various talents, he was still somewhat silenced by Su Xing's words after hearing his reminder. The task of rescuing Tony Stark and protecting him from the attack was actually not part of the original plan. S.H.I.E.L.D's duty is to protect national security and prevent various threats. Nick Fury had long seen the intelligence about Tony Stark being targeted for an attack. However, the problem was that Tony Stark was just an ordinary person. Even if he possessed knowledge and talent in science far surpassing ordinary people, his importance was far less than that of other figures like Captain America. Therefore, regarding the rescue of Tony Stark, there were many more important tasks that needed to be done. Manpower was originally unavailable until Su Xing appeared. Due to Su Xing's rapid completion of tasks, the mission to rescue Tony Stark, though low in priority, was now at the forefront. Adhering to the principle of using what works until it breaks, Nick Fury connected with Su Xing. But Su Xing's words silenced the director. What does 40 minutes left until off-duty mean? What? So when your off-duty time arrives, you just stop working, is that it? What do you take the identity of a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent for? A school class? Nick Fury paused, then asked, "Does this question pose any hindrance to the mission?" Su Xing coughed twice and said, I'm confident I can complete this mission's objective given ample time. But under the current circumstances, I don't have much confidence in completing this operation on time." Listening to Su Xing's explanation, Nick Fury could no longer hold back, dropping his relaxed tone and speaking with extreme severity. "There is no time limit for this operation. Everything is subject to completing the objective. Secondly, let me remind you again, Su Xing, please respect your identity. Don't embarrass yourself." With that, Nick Fury cut off the communication. Communication ended. Su Xing wanted to say something more, but seeing the disconnected communication, he could only let it go, and couldn't help but inwardly complain. "What do you mean, don't embarrass yourself? Is going off-duty on time embarrassing? What's my identity? Work is work, life is life. I'm off-duty in 30 minutes, and in my life, I really am just an ordinary person. As an ordinary person, what do I have to save people with? Am I supposed to say mother ****** to the terrorists?" Complaining aside, Su Xing was quickly preparing the equipment needed for this mission. Su Xing was quite sure that Nick Fury, as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., could easily monitor an agent like himself, who had no background. Even though he was close to going off duty, there was nothing he could do. As a worker, what can you do about your leader's arrangements? After packing up, Su Xing reluctantly headed to the mission location. Watching Su Xing depart, Nick Fury withdrew his gaze and no longer focused on the matter. As for Su Xing's comment about almost off-duty, Nick Fury didn't take it to heart. What? Could he really abandon a rescue mission halfway through? Inside the military Humvee, Tony was dressed in a suit, holding a wine glass. The fine wine in the glass constantly swayed with the bumps. Seeing the serious atmosphere inside the car, Tony, with a nonchalant expression, opened up the conversation. The dullness inside the car was broken. A soldier in the front couldn't hold back and asked Tony about his gossip. For example, whether he had been in contact with certain magazine cover girls. Tony's witty answers made the atmosphere in the car relaxed and pleasant, and a soldier next to him shyly asked Tony for a photo. Tony looked at the camera, still joking. "Don't make gang signs. I love peace. I just want peace. I want peace so much. If peace comes, I'll go bankrupt." And just then, a missile landed on the Humvee in front of Tony. The explosion's fire instantly swept across the road. The Humvee Tony was in, facing the sudden explosion, had no choice but to stop, losing visibility and with the road ahead blocked. The soldier in front opened the car door, preparing to attack the enemy. But he was instantly covered by gunfire from an unknown source and lost his life. Facing the sudden change, Tony lost his usual composure and became flustered. And the soldier who had just asked Tony for a photo merely turned to caution Tony not to move before rushing out of the car door. Tony panicked. Wait. Before he could finish speaking, as soon as the soldier's body exited the car door, He was targeted by concentrated fire and lost his life in the blink of an eye. Seeing the shattered car door, Tony had no choice. Staying in the car would only leave him passive, so he had to get out. But Tony, who had just opened the car door, hadn't even stood firm when he was pulled away from his original spot by a pair of hands. Before the startled Tony could understand what was happening, several bullets had already left large holes in Tony's original position. A steady male voice sounded in Tony's ear. "Mr. Stark, can you stand up on your own?" Tony turned around and saw a handsome Asian face. Realizing that the other party was there to save him, Tony leaned on the Humvee and managed to stand up. "I'm fine. The last time I stood up this awkwardly was after the big fight with the twins." Listening to Tony's playful remark, Su Xing, who had just arrived, was also somewhat speechless. Opening the car door with his left hand, shielding the trajectories of bullets with his body, Su Xing said to Tony, "All right, Mr. Stark, I need you to crawl back into the car like you crawled back into bed that day. Can you do it?" Tony, hearing Su Xing's teasing, instinctively wanted to retort. Before Tony could open his mouth, several bullets, whistling with death, struck beside him. And the Asian man in front of him drew two specially made steel knives from his waist with extreme speed, turned, and swung them. Tony only heard a crisp sound, and two perfectly symmetrical bullet fragments grazed past his ear. Startled, Tony instantly shut up, turned, and scrambled into the car, then witnessed a scene he would never forget. Facing bullets flying from all directions, the man's two steel knives in his hands constantly swung, forming a barrier. Bullets were deflected, and the bullets coming from all directions were also constantly decreasing. Su Xing wielded his steel knives, and what appeared before him was the system panel. Name: Su Xing. Ability: Super Soldier Serum, Captain America's formula. I can do this all day. Perhaps to encourage clocking in and out, Captain America's serum was given to Su Xing as a newcomer gift package. And it was precisely with Captain America's ability that Su Xing was able to complete tasks easily, time and time again. Subsequent rewards then became daily points. If enough points were accumulated, rewards could be exchanged in the system store. These rewards required different amounts of points depending on the strength of the ability. For example, the weakest Captain America serum was directly given to the protagonist. But don't underestimate the Super Soldier Serum. Compared to some powerful superpowers and technological items, it might seem weak, but for the current timeline, before major events occurred and combat power inflated, such an ability was completely sufficient for Su Xing to handle daily work in S.H.I.E.L.D. Terrorists like these were, for Su Xing, easily handled. If he wasn't worried about the terrorists going berserk and directly attacking Tony, Su Xing could now withstand the bullets and deal with these people alone. However, even though Su Xing's ability was more than enough to deal with these terrorists, Su Xing didn't deliberately observe his abilities during the battle. Su Xing was looking at a line of numbers in the upper right corner of the system interface, and the system also gave a prompt at this time. 5 minutes left until off-duty. Refuse overtime, starting with you and me. 5 minutes. Su Xing took a deep breath, and the speed in his hand suddenly quickened. As several bullets ricocheted, several terrorists were pierced by shrapnel and lost their combat capability. The dense fire net surrounding Su Xing instantly had a large gap. Using this gap, Su Xing found time to close the Humvee door. Then he rushed towards the closest terrorist. His foot power erupted, quickly closing the distance to his opponent. Finding the right angle, he chopped down from above at an angle. After chopping, he seamlessly threw it at the enemy next to him. Then he quickly adjusted his position and retrieved his weapon. With Superman's physique, he jumped out of the car roof and threw his weapon at the enemy standing behind the car. 2 fast blades, 2 enemies. The originally noisy environment immediately became quiet. 3 minutes left until closing time. Host, please pay attention to the time. Su Xing shook his head. Still too slow. Then he slowly opened the car door. Mr. Stark, the danger is temporarily cleared. You can come out now. Hearing that the crisis was resolved, Tony's adrenaline gradually dissipated. His curled-up body immediately straightened out, and he slumped onto the car seat. Don't look at Tony as a weapons dealer. He often deals with weapons. But this experience of being swept by weapons, being so close to death, was different from his usual tests with maximum safety. Tony gasped for air, and his tense thoughts gradually returned to normal. Slowly getting out of the car, leaning on the car door, and looking at the bullet holes and the bodies on the ground, Tony finally realized what had just happened. He almost died just now. Looking at Su Xing, who was slowly walking to retrieve his weapon, Tony suddenly realized a question. Did this person just split a bullet in half with a blade? Is this even human? Looking at the neat and clean wounds on the surrounding bandits, Tony was even more shocked. He, alone, with 2 blades, solved several vicious terrorists who could instantly kill soldiers? Tony took a deep breath and accepted reality. He could even split bullets with a blade, so what was there to not accept? Su Xing retrieved his weapon and came before Tony. Tony swallowed, trying his best to stay calm, and said, "That was really dangerous, but the problems are all solved now, right?" As a super genius, Tony had a genius's pride. Thinking of his embarrassed state just now, Tony instinctively didn't want to admit it, so he tried his best to remain calm and save face. Su Xing couldn't help but smile when he heard Tony's reply. Su Xing had understood Tony's tsundere personality in his previous life, so he naturally knew the meaning behind Tony's seemingly calm words. If it were after work, Su Xing would have liked to chat with Tony for a while. But for now, Su Xing said to Tony, "Mr. Stark, as far as I know, the danger has not been completely eliminated. Now, please find a good place to hide." Tony heard Su Xing's reply, joking as he immediately got out of the car. Being famous always attracts unnecessary admiration. After getting out of the car, Tony saw the gruesome state of the terrorists, covered his mouth, and almost threw up. Fortunately, as a weapons dealer, Tony had some exposure to such scenes, so his reaction wasn't as strong. However, his gaze towards Su Xing gradually became complex. With one slash, a bandit was dealt with from head to toe. As a weapons dealer, Tony clearly knew how much destructive power that required. Tony had no doubt that this person was essentially a human weapon. However, in addition to the shock of Su Xing's strength, Tony's eyes also held a hint of fear. From head to toe, it didn't sound shocking, but seeing it on the scene, it was a bloody spectacle. As a normal person, Tony witnessed a human life disappear so gruesomely, and fear was inevitable. Tony himself had some doubts about Su Xing arriving alone and wondered whether to call for help. But seeing such a scene, Tony felt it was unnecessary. Such strength was enough to ensure his safety. Su Xing noticed Tony's gaze towards him. As an agent, Su Xing naturally perceived Tony's thoughts. If it were peacetime, Su Xing might even tease Tony a bit. But now he was in a hurry to get off work, so he didn't care much about Tony's gaze. Tony took a deep breath, adjusted his state, and asked Su Xing, "Okay, what's our plan next?" Su Xing raised an eyebrow. "Plan? The plan is for you to hide and quickly call for help. Then pray that someone comes to rescue you before the danger arrives." Tony was stunned by Su Xing's reply, then asked, "Then, what about you? What are you going to do? You'll protect my safety during this time, right?" Su Xing looked at Tony and replied, "Of course, Mr. Stark, I will certainly protect your safety until backup arrives." Su Xing paused, adding, "During working hours." Tony's action of pulling out his phone paused. He suspected that his hearing had been damaged by the gunshots just now, causing him to not hear the words clearly. "No, buddy, what do you mean? What do you mean by protecting my safety during working hours? Do you even have a concept of getting off work? You just killed several terrorists with a knife. And now you're telling me you're getting off work?" Tony looked into Su Xing's eyes, his voice a bit floaty. "Sorry, is there something wrong with my hearing? What was your last sentence?" Su Xing stared at the system panel and repeated, "During working hours, I am responsible for protecting your safety. This is my job. But after work, this matter has nothing to do with me." Tony's eyes were filled with bewilderment. "Let's speak English?" Tony stammered, "I still don't quite understand what you mean." After saying this, Tony felt Su Xing looking at him with the gaze one would give an idiot, as if he were a fool. Su Xing patiently explained again, "Mr. Stark, having working hours means having off-duty hours. I am just a worker who strictly adheres to work hours. Not everyone can define their work hours as freely as you. And now, I'm about to get off work. During my off-duty hours, I don't want any work-related matters to disturb me, understand? So, For your own good, you should seek rescue as soon as possible. After confirming that his hearing was fine, Tony's mind still couldn't straighten out the logic. He understood every word, but why couldn't he understand what it meant when put together? A few minutes ago, he was attacked. The people who attacked him killed the soldiers protecting him like slaughtering chickens. And this person in front of him, with 2 blades, killed the people who attacked him like slaughtering chickens. He physically cut people into 2 pieces as if cutting melons and vegetables. Now, this person says he's getting off work. Tony looked at Su Xing, completely flustered. Now he only had one question in his mind. Master, what kind of work do you do? Ignoring Tony's wise look, Su Xing began operating on his wrist, not forgetting to remind him. Mr. Stark, I have a suggestion for you. No matter what you think, my suggestion is to quickly leave this military vehicle to prevent terrorists from accidentally harming you by throwing missiles. Hearing Su Xing's serious warning, Tony also cast aside his internal conflict about getting off work and slowly began to move his feet. You're not coming with me? Tony asked as he moved. Su Xing merely shook his head, still not stopping his operation. No, if terrorists really throw missiles, it's only to eliminate me. If I follow you, it's very likely to accidentally harm you. Listening to Su Xing's methodical reply, Tony still didn't believe Su Xing was really going to get off work. Looking at Su Xing's calm movements, Tony seemed to suddenly understand Su Xing's meaning. It must be because the threat had disappeared. That's why he said he was getting off work. After all, with the threat removed, it was no different from getting off work. He must have just been joking. It seems I was too nervous. Thinking of this, Tony stopped his steps, and his tone returned to ease. Your sense of humor is really great, buddy, but I'd prefer you not to joke like that with someone who just went through a fright. Su Xing stretched his limbs and looked at the system panel. 1 minute left until off-duty time. Host, please pay attention. Seeing Tony stop, Su Xing frowned, a little confused. What joke? Tony wiped his face with one hand, not refuting, but continuing. Nothing. When will the terrorists' attack arrive? Su Xing placed his hand on the hilt of his blade and replied with a smile. If nothing goes wrong, in about 2 minutes. Tony opened his mouth and laughed twice without emotion. 2 minutes. And then you tell me you're getting off work and leaving. Tony now determined that Su Xing was just joking, so he put on a polite smile and continued to ask, then when do you get off work, Kung Fu Master? Ignoring Tony's stereotypical joke, the smile on Su Xing's face was genuine. Now, after Su Xing's words fell, a strong wind swept through. A small aircraft with very advanced technology landed beside Su Xing. Su Xing walked 2 steps to the aircraft and boarded it. Then the aircraft flew into the sky, and Su Xing waved to Tony. Stay safe, Mr. Stark. Tony, standing below, was somewhat unable to open his eyes due to the swirling sand. After opening his eyes, Tony watched Su Xing's aircraft fly further and further into the sky. After confirming that Su Xing had truly left, Tony put away his smile, pulled out his phone from his pocket, and began dialing a number, muttering to himself. Heh, Asian humor. Tony was no longer nervous and began calling for help. The call connected, and before Tony could even say a word, he heard a gunshot, and the sound of several bullets hitting the car captured Tony's attention. Tony looked in the direction of the gunshot, only to see a few blurry figures in the distance. One of them clearly held a gun, and in that instant, several more bullets shot over. Ah! Tony let out a sharp cry. He couldn't hold his phone steady, and it fell to the ground. Hello? Hello? Tony took off running. Tony wasn't afraid of the first attack because the impact was too great and his adrenaline surged. His brain was numb with extreme fear, only thinking about how to escape. But after Su Xing's rescue, Tony had recovered from the attack. Coupled with Su Xing's warning, this attack gave Tony enough time to react. No one could endure 2 impacts in a short period of time. So Tony had completely lost his composure at this point, and he ran clumsily towards the rock ahead. Hiding behind the rock, Tony gasped for breath violently. Tony, who had a brief respite, had only one thought in his mind. Don't eat sour radish. Was that actor with 2 blades telling the truth? He wasn't joking. The terrorists were really nearby? Tony leaned against the rock, completely losing control of his expressions, his logical thinking thoroughly confused. So he really left? Tony felt that what happened today was truly beyond his capacity to bear. The weapons demonstration was going perfectly well. An attack suddenly arrived, and all his protective soldiers sacrificed themselves. Just when he thought he was done for, a humanoid weapon with 2 blades saved him. He just caught his breath, thinking he was rescued, when he told him he was leaving. The reason was still, "It's time to get off work." Then what exactly was he here for? You didn't even finish saving him properly. Tony didn't have much time to think. A missile slammed into the sandpit next to Tony, creating a crater with its weight. At that moment, Tony saw the logo on the missile, Stark Industries. As the missile exploded, Tony was thrown to the ground by the huge blast. Fortunately, with the cushioning of the rock and the bulletproof vest on his body, Tony just barely survived the explosion without life-threatening injuries. And then, Tony could no longer withstand the dual pressure of mental and physical stress and passed out. Meanwhile, on the other side, Su Xing flew back to his lodging. Ding! You have clocked out on time. Reward 10 points. Today's clock-in reward totals 20 points. Looking at the system's reward, Su Xing pulled off the tie around his neck. Then he comfortably sat on a nearby chair, relaxing, but his heart was still somewhat unsettled. This was not because he was worried about Tony Stark. Saving Tony was a task assigned by S.H.I.E.L.D. itself. Since it was an organizational task, in Su Xing's view, it belonged to work content. As someone who detested overtime, Su Xing would absolutely not bring work matters into his off-duty time. Not to mention there was still the system. Overtime is impossible in this life. How good it is to clock in and out on time every day and receive system rewards. Why risk your life to work overtime? Furthermore, Su Xing was not worried about Tony being in mortal danger. Upon arriving at the scene, Su Xing immediately recognized it as a scene from the movie. In the movie, the terrorists' purpose in attacking Tony was to kidnap him and force him to personally manufacture weapons for the terrorists' use. So Tony would absolutely not suffer fatal harm. If Tony didn't suffer fatal harm, then saving Tony could completely wait until tomorrow. And in order to quickly find Tony when he started work the next day, Su Xing even made a detour when he got off work, avoiding the terrorists' surveillance, making the terrorists think that the fallen companions were the result of combat with soldiers. This way, the terrorists would still proceed according to the original plot. Then finding Tony would be no effort at all. Su Xing's current unease had only one reason. What is the biggest fear of getting off work early? It's being discovered by the boss that everyone else is working overtime, and you're the only one who isn't. The boss might not know who worked overtime, but he remembers clearly who didn't. Su Xing silently calculated the reasons for getting off work in his mind. Beep, beep, beep. Noise sounded in his ear. Su Xing opened the screen on his wrist, and it prominently displayed the name Su Xing least wanted to see after getting off work. Nick Fury requests connection. Inside S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Fury had just finished commanding a mission. After confirming through the cameras that the mission was successfully completed and the personnel had safely returned, Director Fury breathed a sigh of relief. He took off his headset and sat down in his chair. He opened the screen and began to review the ongoing but unfinished missions. Flipping through the mission list and staring at the large screen in front of him, Director Fury checked each mission one by one. When he saw the mission Su Xing was performing, Director Fury's relaxed brow suddenly furrowed. 6 large characters were displayed on the screen. This mission is in progress. Director Fury glanced at the time. 3 or 4 hours had passed since the mission was assigned. He had been busy commanding that major mission, so Director Fury had no free time to pay attention to Su Xing's mission. In Director Fury's opinion, the mission of rescuing Tony Stark itself didn't have much practical consideration. To put it plainly, this matter was simply about rescuing a leader of a military-industrial enterprise who had been attacked by terrorists. Firstly, this case did not involve any superpowered individuals. Secondly, it didn't have much impact on the U.S.'s security. It's easy for many people to misunderstand that S.H.I.E.L.D. isn't just as depicted in movies, constantly dealing with earth-saving matters. On the contrary, S.H.I.E.L.D., from its inception, was a secret organization subordinate to the U.S. government. S.H.I.E.L.D's primary job is to maintain the security of the U.S., so its connection with the U.S. government is very close. As one of the leading military enterprise heads in the U.S., if S.H.I.E.L.D could save Tony, it would gain the support of Stark Enterprises, thereby achieving higher political prestige and more political support. Rescuing Tony Stark from the terrorists was actually a political mission. Nevertheless, Director Fury, upholding his high standards as the king of agents, dispatched Su Xing to carry out this mission, striving for its completion. Director Fury had reviewed the specific details of this mission. Tony Stark was attacked by a group of terrorists with no strict organization. With Su Xing's ability, taking out the terrorist lair alone wouldn't be a big problem. Not to mention that Su Xing's task was just to rescue Tony Stark from the terrorists, which was a relatively simple mission. According to Director Fury's estimation, even including travel time, an hour would be completely sufficient, and it shouldn't still be in an unfinished state. Due to his strong confidence in Su Xing's abilities and the simplicity of the mission, Director Fury didn't pay much attention to its progress. But now, Director Fury couldn't help but feel a little worried. The mission wasn't difficult, so if it wasn't finished by now, something unexpected must have happened. So, Director Fury clicked on Su Xing's contact information. On Su Xing's side, Su Xing looked at the name displayed on the screen, sorted out his thoughts, and connected the call. Director Fury's voice came from the other end of the phone. Agent, how is the mission progressing? Has anything unexpected happened? Su Xing complained internally. What unexpected could happen? The unexpected thing is that it's delaying my getting off work. Facing his superior, Su Xing lightly coughed twice and said, reporting, Director, the mission is proceeding very smoothly. Only a small, unexpected incident occurred. Director Fury was puzzled. What unexpected incident? Could it be that such a small mission could go wrong? Su Xing's voice was relaxed and clear as he said, Director, when I arrived, Tony Stark had already been attacked. Su Xing's words were very smooth, even carrying a hint of guilt for not perfectly executing the mission. Even Director Fury couldn't detect any hint of guilt in Su Xing's words. Before Director Fury could speak, Su Xing quickly interjected, Director, please rest assured, I can currently guarantee that Tony Stark has no safety issues. I am currently fully searching for news about Tony Stark. I will report the latest situation to you at any time. Listening to Su Xing's perfectly coherent words, Director Fury didn't think much more about it. Received, Agent, be careful. Then he hung up the phone and turned his attention to other missions. Director Fury didn't think Su Xing would encounter any unexpected incidents in this small mission. After confirming that the mission was without incident, Director Fury no longer paid attention to it. After confirming the call was disconnected, a slight smile unconsciously appeared on Su Xing's lips. He picked up the remote control from the table next to the sofa and turned on the US version of the news broadcast. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now broadcasting a major case. Mr. Tony Stark, the owner of Stark Enterprises, a billionaire, and a frequent cover model for Playboy magazine, was attacked on his way back to the country. The scene was very chaotic, with multiple casualties, and Tony Stark was not found among them. It has now been preliminarily determined as. Su Xing turned off the TV, picked up the coffee beans he bought from the supermarket, and walked towards the kitchen. Yes, Prime Minister really didn't deceive me. Prime Minister, they have revolted. Foreign Secretary, what? Where? Prime Minister, it's already on TV, don't you know? Foreign Secretary, I can't help it, my TV is broken. After transmigrating to the US and working at S.H.I.E.L.D for a short time, Su Xing personally experienced what it means for the world to be a makeshift troop. Although Director Fury's misunderstanding of this mission was almost entirely self-inflicted, but as the leader of a secret organization, isn't he somewhat responsible for being deceived? In contrast, the requirement for working hours in the agent contract seemed much more normal. Throwing the device on his wrist aside, Su Xing twisted his neck. After the baptism of his previous life, Su Xing had a very keen judgment about the workplace. The reason Director Fury didn't pursue this mission too much. It was precisely because of his initial refusal. With that detail, Director Fury had a degree of leniency towards him. Moreover, things should be done slowly. The greater the ability, the more missions. Instead of desperately risking his life to do other missions, he might as well cling to Tony Stark and exploit him. With Su Xing's current strength, he didn't have the guts to fight Hulk or Thor. But to talk about fighting terrorists who haven't had any formal training, Su Xing not only has the guts, but a lot of it. It feels good to bully the weak for a while, and it feels good to keep bullying the weak. As for working overtime to find someone, as he said on the phone, find a hammer. When off work, one should rest. Work matters can wait until tomorrow. As he put the coffee beans into the grinder, Su Xing felt a little emotional. The above operations would probably be useless in his previous life's Huaxia. But here, where even the military can take holidays, it's too simple. Grinding the coffee beans, Su Xing opened the system panel. Name, Su Xing. Ability, Super Soldier Serum. I can do this all day. Intelligence, 4. Strength, 4.58. Endurance, 3. Combat skills, 4. Speed, 3.24. Note, official data, full score 7. Looking at his specific character attributes, Su Xing exchanged all 20 points he earned today for attribute points. Attribute points, 0.02. Su Xing added all the points to speed. His speed value became 3.26. After receiving the Super Soldier Serum, Su Xing did not have Captain America's extensive combat experience, so his combat skills did not reach Captain America's level. But in other aspects, Su Xing was practically identical to Captain America. Looking at the pitifully small number of points, Su Xing's expression remained normal. As a reward for clocking in and out of work every day, Su Xing could obtain a total of 20 points daily, which seemed like a lot. However, it only seemed like it. Points could not be directly added as values. They had to be converted into attribute points. The conversion ratio between attribute points and points was 1 to 1,000. 10 points, converted into directly usable attribute points, was only 0.01. This meant that even if Su Xing clocked in and out on time every day, he would only gain 0.02 in directly usable values per day. Initially, Su Xing was quite speechless when he saw the points conversion. Are you doing a Pinduoduo-style billion-dollar subsidy here? However, after experiencing it firsthand, Su Xing shut his mouth. As per official data, every single point increase in various abilities represented a complete qualitative leap. And even these tiny numerical increases resulted in a visible improvement in combat. Take Su Xing slicing bullets with a knife while rescuing Tony. For example, Captain America in the movie would absolutely not be able to achieve such precision and speed. But after a period of consistently clocking in, Su Xing could do it quite easily. Even a mosquito is meat, let alone this wasn't just a mosquito. Feeling his new strength, Su Xing took a sip of coffee and looked at the countdown on the system panel with great excitement. Sign in for a certain period to unlock the system shop. Su Xing put down his cup, looking at the unchanging system interface, feeling inexplicably annoyed. According to Su Xing's guess, this certain period should be the occurrence of some major event. Currently, Tony had already encountered an accident. Under Su Xing's deliberate manipulation, Tony should have been captured in the cave without any surprises. In the cave, Tony would undergo a transformation, take on a sense of responsibility, and become Iron Man. Around the time Tony became Iron Man, various things would begin to happen. Hulk, Doctor Strange, Captain America's unfreezing, Winter Soldier's awakening, Wakanda's emergence. Thinking of this, Su Xing felt a headache and immense pressure on his shoulders. In the increasingly bizarre universe, there were many major events threatening Earth. In major events that endangered the entire Earth, even the superheroes could not fully protect themselves. However, Su Xing took another sip of coffee. What does this have to do with me? He just wanted to clock in and out on time. If there was really a danger that threatened his ability to clock in and out, no matter what, I will act. With that, Su Xing put away his rather Chinibu gesture. Sleep. As an office worker, one must have a very good biological clock. Rest time cannot be disturbed. As for Tony, Su Xing lay on the soft bed, adjusted the air conditioning to the most comfortable temperature, hugged the sheet, and closed his eyes contentedly. I hope he gets a good night's sleep. At the same time, inside the cave, Tony slowly opened his eyes. Noticing a foreign object in his nasal cavity, Tony slowly pulled out the tube inserted into his nose. Tony struggled to get up. Looking at the electromagnet on his chest, Tony was somewhat at a loss. Under the dim light, Tony saw another person standing nearby. Ethan was tinkering with an instrument. Hearing the movement, Ethan turned his head. Awake! Ethan looked at Tony. The device on your chest was installed by me. Although your bulletproof vest blocked most of the impact, there are still shrapnel slowly moving towards your heart. This device acts as an electromagnet, attracting the shrapnel and temporarily sustaining your life. Tony reached out, signaling Ethan to pause. Under Ethan's confused gaze, Tony asked words that bewildered Ethan. Tell me, buddy, you're not going to clock out in a bit, are you? The next morning, listening to Tony's account, Ethan once thought Tony's head had suffered a severe blow when he fell. For no other reason than the entire logic of the story was wrong. A super soldier suddenly jumped out, defeated all the terrorists who wanted to kidnap Tony. Then he suddenly got on a plane and left by himself. After listening to Tony's story, Ethan directly asked Tony, if things really happened as you said, then what was his motive? He couldn't possibly have really clocked out as he said, could he? Hearing Ethan's skepticism, Tony was also very frustrated. I don't know either, but it just happened that way. Seeing Tony's distraught expression, Ethan patted Tony's shoulder and explained. Perhaps the whole thing was just a strange dream you had after you passed out. The truth is, you were suddenly attacked on your way back, then the soldiers were killed, you tried to seek rescue, but you were knocked unconscious by a bomb. Tony listened to Ethan's explanation, his heart also wavering a bit. Looking at Tony's dazed face, Ethan continued. Besides, how could anyone possibly slice a bullet with a knife? Captain America from World War II needed a shield. After hearing Ethan's words, Tony also felt some relief. Perhaps. At this moment, the cave entrance opened. Welcome back, the famous Mr. Tony Stark. A group of terrorists walked in. Walking in the very center was a short, stout, bald man. Seeing everyone enter, Tony and Ethan immediately heightened their vigilance. The terrorist leader in the center, seeing Tony react, waved his hands repeatedly, making exaggerated gestures. Don't get excited, don't get excited. Mr. Stark, you are my super idol. Tony coldly replied. Then I truly feel disgusted with myself. The terrorist leader in the middle still had a wide smile. Don't be like that, Mr. Tony Stark, you should know, I understand your artwork better than your clients. With that, the terrorist leader pointed to Tony's chest. This is your masterpiece, Mr. Stark. Being enchanted by one's own artwork is a process an artist should experience. So, you should still thank me. Touching his chest, Tony remembered the last scene before he was blown up, and he remembered Stark Enterprises marked on the bomb. For a moment, Tony was speechless. Seeing Tony not respond, the terrorist leader also reined in his smile. I'll make it short, Mr. Stark. Someone wants to pay for your life, but the buyer's price is a bit low. As a transaction, this deal is very unpleasant, so you're stuck with me, Mr. Stark. The terrorist pointed at Ethan and said, I asked him to save your life not because I truly admire you. Since a one-time deal isn't possible, then I'll have to get something from elsewhere. You make us some weapons, and I won't threaten your life. How does that sound? Tony raised his head, a sarcastic smile on his lips. You're even funnier than that weird guy in my dream. If you had the same appearance as him, my impression of you might be deeper. The terrorist heard Tony's sarcasm, tilted his head, and the people next to him immediately understood. At the same time, a string of curses came from the sky. What is all this? Su Xing was flying his fighter jet, his head aching as he looked at the screen full of red dots. He seemed to have overlooked a problem. Tony was indeed imprisoned. The question was, where was he imprisoned? Logically, a terrorist's den should be easy to find. Although he didn't know the specific one, it would be quick to scan through them one by one using the elimination method. Therefore, Su Xing had the idea of putting a tracker on Tony. But when Su Xing accessed S.H.I.E.L.D's database to search for terrorist dens, the entire screen was immediately filled with den information. This wasn't looking for terrorists at all. This was clearly looking for civilians in a terrorist's nest. Su Xing looked at the dense red dots, his heart stopping, suddenly regretting not having taken Tony directly yesterday. Now, the entire region was filled with potential prisons where Tony might be held. What made Su Xing even more speechless was that, all along his way, the sound of gunfire from below had never stopped. Watch out for the grenade. I need support. I'm bleeding. I'm bleeding. I need help. Listening to the sounds from below, Su Xing suddenly seemed to understand why China's CS scores in his previous life couldn't compare to those on foreign servers. While you were still having fun on computers domestically, foreign servers were already doing Jinren, Immortal, CS. Could the professional players trained like that be the same? Domestic players were still wearing headphones to listen for footsteps, while foreign players were already listening through walls. The talent you were so proud of was merely the selection standard for those born abroad. Su Xing kept clicking on the screen, deleting the areas that had already been investigated. But even so, there were still an overwhelming number of red dots on the screen. Su Xing could only bite the bullet and continue his carpet search, feeling inexplicably guilty towards Tony. No way around it. It's not that I don't want to save you, but my abilities are limited. I can only make you suffer for a bit first. Inside the cave, gurgle gurgle, Tony was pressed into the water by two muscular men. Tony had never experienced this before and immediately took in a large gulp of water. After lifting his head from the water, Tony greedily breathed in the air, but his throat was choked and he coughed for a long time. Feeling the force on his head again, Tony hurriedly opened his mouth. Wait. But before he could finish speaking, his head was forcibly pressed back into the water. Tony was caught off guard and drank another large gulp of water. After what felt like an incredibly long dozen seconds to Tony, he finally lifted his head from the water again. Tony felt a burning sensation in his nasal cavity, and he completely lost his spirit. The leader walked forward and asked Tony fiercely, "Mr. Stark, are you willing to cooperate now and help us manufacture weapons?" Tony blinked his eyes, which were soaked with water and very sore, and opened his mouth, wanting to agree. This wasn't because Tony was truly afraid of the torture or truly wanted to cooperate with the terrorists. Although Tony was a weapons dealer, he had a very strong, simple sense of justice deep down. He would never do anything that violated morality, no matter what. Tony agreed simply to temporarily stabilize the terrorists, buy time, and look for an opportunity to counterattack. Tony opened his mouth. The leader directly stretched out his hand and pressed Tony's head into the water. "You're just that stubborn, aren't you, Mr. Stark?" His head was put back into the water, and Tony was dumbfounded. "Don't just interrogate me. I didn't say no. You have to give me a chance to agree, right?" In the sky, Su Xing pushed the fighter jet's horsepower to the maximum, searching quickly in the sky. For such a large number of terrorist dens, it wasn't necessary to search them all-encompassingly. From memory, the terrorists who kidnapped Tony used weapons from Stark Enterprises, so he could directly exclude those self-made armed groups and dens using other brands of weapons. Su Xing hovered in the air and suddenly discovered a relatively more formal den. Although he had memories from his previous life, Su Xing only remembered the general plot. He certainly couldn't remember the specific scenes clearly. After all, no one told him that one day he would personally fly a plane to find Tony Stark, right? Su Xing parked the fighter jet in the air. He began to observe carefully. Several terrorists were patrolling the entrance with their weapons. Compared to other dens, this place seemed much more professional. It was quite similar to the terrorists who kidnapped Tony in the movie. Adjusting the parameters, Su Xing gathered general information from the sky. Next to several patrolling personnel, there were piles of ammunition and missiles. Su Xing zoomed in on his view again. The missiles were clearly marked with Stark Enterprises. Zooming out again, the place where several patrolling personnel stood was also a cave. The more Su Xing looked, the more he felt this was where Tony was being held. So he adjusted his position and lowered a rope. Looking at the several patrolling personnel on the periphery, Su Xing pulled out two specially made steel knives from his waist and stretched his shoulders. Looking at the patrolling personnel at the entrance, he openly snuck in. Inside the cave, Ethan shouted loudly, "His injury hasn't healed yet. The shrapnel cut his lung. If you keep doing this, he'll lose his life." Ethan's words made the terrorist who was torturing Tony stop. The leader lifted Tony's head from the water and said to Tony, "You heard him, Mr. Stark. If you're harmed again, your life will be in danger. So, tell me, are you willing to cooperate with us?" Tony's arms were held by two men, half kneeling on the ground, and he said weakly, "I agree. But I need raw materials, otherwise I can't conjure weapons out of thin air." Hearing Tony agree, the leader motioned for his two subordinates to release Tony. Tony, no longer supported, immediately lay down on the ground. Tony said to the leader, "Give me a pen and a few sheets of paper, and I'll give you the material information I need." The leader turned and left the cave. "We will provide you with what you want, Mr. Stark. After all, our entire force relies on your weapons." Watching the terrorists leave, Ethan hurried forward to help Tony up. "Are you all right?" Tony pushed Ethan away and vomited the water from his stomach to the side. After spitting, Tony looked at the water on the ground and asked Ethan without turning his head, "My weapons?" Ethan stood up. "They rely on stealing your weapons to improve their combat effectiveness." Saying that, Ethan walked forward and helped Tony up from the ground. "Come, the electromagnet on your chest probably got wet just now. Let me see if there's any major problem." Tony did not resist Ethan's help this time, letting Ethan pull him up. His expression lost its usual arrogance and disdain, becoming somewhat heavy instead. In his mind, he couldn't help but recall the female reporter's interview at the awards ceremony. "Do you know that you make money by killing people?" Tony recalled what that mysterious man had said yesterday. Did he really just get off work? How could there be such an absurd reason? With Ethan's help, Tony lay back down on the bed. Looking at the light above, Tony felt a little dazed. "Is this your goal? To make me see all this?" After sorting out Su Xing's entire affair in his mind, Tony closed his eyes. No matter what, aside from the clumsy reason, he was at least a good person who valued life. At this moment, Su Xing was hiding behind cover, dodging the terrorists' bullets. After casually breaking a terrorist's neck, Su Xing was somewhat puzzled. "Damn it, why don't I use a gun? How long will it take to chop them down one by one? Here's the paper and pen you asked for, Mr. Stark." After receiving the paper and pen, Stark quickly began writing on the paper. Soon, Tony had prepared the list and handed it back to the terrorists who delivered the message. After confirming that it was indeed the materials written down, the subordinate took the list Tony had prepared and walked out. Watching the terrorists leave, Tony's inner conviction grew stronger. Yes, it must be like this. You know who must have done this to make him feel remorse. After clarifying his thoughts, Tony suddenly realized something. If you know who only wanted to teach him a lesson, then he would definitely come back to save him. After all, his goal was definitely not to take his life. Under the influence of his narcissism, Tony, who believed he had completely understood the whole situation, cheered up again. Tony turned his head and looked at Ethan. "Relax, doctor, we'll be rescued soon." Ethan rubbed his stomach and looked at Tony in confusion. Tony didn't explain his thoughts clearly to Ethan. After all, this matter was indeed too bizarre. It's hard not to doubt the truthfulness of this matter. It was understandable for the doctor to be suspicious of this matter. Tony glanced at the cave, confirmed that no one else was coming in, and whispered his plan to Ethan. "Listen, buddy, I randomly wrote down a few materials in the list for those uneducated terrorists. All materials they can get, but will take some time. We just need to stall for a while, and things will naturally turn for the better for us." Ethan listened to Tony's explanation and understood Tony's plan. Looking at Tony's face, Ethan showed a trusting smile. "Why did I forget you're a genius inventor?" Hearing Ethan's praise, Tony, full of confidence again, said narcissistically with his foreign face, "You still know very little about me, doctor." At this moment, Su Xing wielded the steel knife in his hand, rushing at an extremely fast speed towards the terrorists who were firing. With a turn, he simultaneously cut off the hands of two terrorists, neutralizing their threat. Watching Su Xing act like a god of slaughter, some of the remaining terrorists were already scared out of their wits. They directly switched to full auto, sweeping at Su Xing. They completely disregarded the arsenal next to Su Xing. Before their relatively calm accomplices could stop them, the bullets had already poured out. Watching the bullets fly over, Su Xing frowned. The bullets naturally couldn't hit Su Xing, whose speed had been enhanced, but Su Xing couldn't protect the arsenal behind him. Instantly, gunfire directly penetrated the arsenal behind Su Xing. All of a sudden, an explosion sounded. Su Xing dodged to the side. Watching the soaring explosion, Su Xing felt a bit numb inside. Damn, it's over now. He was supposed to rescue Tony. With such a big commotion, how could he rescue Tony now? In the cave, Tony was sitting on the ground, chatting with Ethan about everyday things. At this moment, a sound suddenly came from outside. Hey, you be careful. What followed was a series of explosions, and also bursts of gunshots, as well as the shouts of the terrorists. Hearing the commotion, Tony and Ethan turned their heads at the same time. Tony even stood up excitedly. Tony turned his head and asked Ethan, "The terrorists' weapons are just outside." Ethan heard Tony's question, nodded, and responded to Tony. Upon confirmation, Tony couldn't help but feel excited inside. Oh my God, can I finally end this torment now? And on Su Xing's side, accompanied by the soaring flames, the entire terrorist camp fell into extreme chaos. For a time, screams and various wails were incessant. Fuck, Su Xing cursed. Then he gritted his teeth and, braving the deep flames and the rain of bullets from the terrorists, rushed into the cave. And at this moment in the cave, listening to the continuous commotion outside, Tony was even more restless. At this moment, Tony, who was constantly paying attention to the sounds outside, suddenly felt the sound change. Tony asked Ethan, "Doctor, do you feel like the sound is a bit off?" Ethan was full of confusion. "No. Why, did you notice anything?" Tony closed his eyes and listened carefully. "Don't you feel that there's suddenly a noisy sound coming from the entrance?" Ethan also stood up. "It seems that way." Tony's face showed a bit of uncontrollable excitement. Footsteps, clamor, all in a mess. Listening to the footsteps getting closer and closer, Tony became even more excited. Seeing a shadow appear from the entrance, Tony, to maintain his demeanor, deliberately said with dissatisfaction in his tone, "Finally, you've arrived." Tony adjusted his body. Then, he heard a familiar voice. "Mr. Stark, it seems you're very excited about our cooperation." Tony's expression instantly became a bit unnatural. At the same time, Su Xing walked out of the cave, his face covered in dust. Looking at the sky full of fire, Su Xing shook his knife. He walked towards the fighter jet elegantly and gracefully. He was not affected by the noisy surroundings at all. Shit. Got it wrong, not this one. In the cave, Tony looked at the equipment brought by the terrorists and quickly controlled his emotions. He indirectly asked the terrorists, "Your speed in acquiring these materials is a bit beyond my imagination." The leader smoked a cigarette, patted the materials, and said to Tony with a chuckle, "No problem. After all, they were all disassembled from the weapons you developed." Someone looked at Tony. "Just disassembling parts from these weapons took us a lot of effort." A strong man came over and patted Tony's shoulder. "Have you ever used the weapons you developed? It's truly amazing, baby." Tony was in a trance. "You mean, the commotion just now was all caused by you violently disassembling parts?" The leader extinguished his cigarette and looked at Tony, saying, "I'm very sorry, Mr. Stark, we can't provide you with a very suitable working environment, but I don't think you have much choice, do you? Great inventor." Listening to the leader's taunts, the surrounding terrorists all laughed. Tony's mood instantly soured upon hearing the terrorists' words. So, the commotion just now was all caused by these terrorists violently disassembling parts? Just based on the noise from before, Tony now strongly suspected that before Su Xing arrived, he would be taken away with them by these operations that would make a safety officer pass away on the spot. Tony couldn't help but think of some bad conjectures now. That mysterious Asian man yesterday, he wouldn't really have gone off work as he said, would he? If you know who wasn't wrong, wouldn't that be a big problem? He could even go off work. Then how could he be sure he wasn't on holiday today? Seeing Tony's silence, the leader felt a surge of satisfaction. After walking out of the cave, the leader disdainfully lit another cigarette. What a playboy. Still being kept in the cave like a dog by him. At this moment, the leader suddenly noticed something was wrong. What was with the fire in the distance? The subordinate who came to report just happened to meet the leader at the entrance. "Boss, something happened. Our other camp was attacked." The leader frowned. Don't eat sour radishes. Send someone to see what's going on. And in the sky, watching the terrorists drive away from the entrance, Su Xing lowered the rope again. For your own good, Tony. Hope I don't get it wrong this time. After the terrorists left, Ethan saw that Tony's expression was off. He walked forward and patted Tony's shoulder. Relax, man. I know what you're thinking. On my first day here, I wish they'd blow themselves up. After Tony heard Ethan's words, his brain suddenly felt a bit abnormal. Forgive me, doctor, what did I just hear? You mean, since you came here, they've been firing indiscriminately like this? Ethan nodded. Next to a pile of various missiles? Looking at Ethan's certain gaze, Tony inexplicably felt his head spinning a bit. 1 second, he was demonstrating the latest weapons to the military, securing a massive order. The next second, he was bragging and singing on the road, when he was suddenly hijacked by terrorists. The soldiers sent to protect him were powerless to resist. And the terrorists who dared to carry out such an operation were casually playing with lighters next to bombs. You say they're incompetent, yet they can kidnap you. You say they're not incompetent, yet they might blow themselves up the next second. Plus that lunatic from yesterday who suddenly said he was getting off work. If all of this was true, never mind whether you know who would come to save him after getting off work. Even if he did, Tony highly doubted whether he could survive in the hands of these kindergarten dropout terrorists. Tony wiped his face. Looking around, he suddenly felt the whole world was unreal. On the hillside not far from the camp, Su Xing held a telescope, observing the situation inside the camp. Almost every terrorist in the camp had a gun. As the sun set, the fire from the muzzles continuously sprayed fury under the yellow glow. At this moment, next to the armory, a large number of missiles were being dismantled. And next to the camp, with the camp as the center, some dilapidated houses surrounded the camp. He threw the telescope aside. Su Xing couldn't help but complain. S.H.I.E.L.D's researchers have no imagination at all. The whole telescope really just looks like a telescope, not high-tech at all. With the super soldier serum's enhancement, Su Xing didn't particularly need a telescope to observe his targets during missions. Most missions had intelligence officers collecting information beforehand. And during missions, Su Xing could easily gather information on the field with his enhanced vision. However, this mission was different. The intelligence officers had not considered the detailed information of each terrorist camp. Su Xing had no choice but to observe the intelligence within the camp himself. Looking at the few jeeps driving away from the camp entrance, Su Xing had almost confirmed that this was the cave where Tony was being held. Su Xing packed up the equipment placed aside. The plot should now be at the point where Tony had reached an agreement with the terrorists, temporarily stabilizing the situation. The camp he had inadvertently destroyed just now should belong to the terrorist force that kidnapped Tony. Having confirmed the target, Su Xing couldn't help but feel a little emotional. I thought I was just catching a few petty thieves, but I ended up hitting the main nest. Looking at the camp from a distance, Su Xing gradually recalled the plot details from the movie. Strictly speaking, the terrorists who kidnapped Tony couldn't really be called terrorists. Their organization was already considered a local armed force, capable of speaking on the public stage. The reason this detail was overlooked by many was also related to Iron Man. Compared to the Mark I and later armors, this group of people indeed seemed very weak. But from the perspective of an ordinary person, this group was definitely the local warlords. In fact, with such weapon equipment and organizational structure, it was enough to make even average superheroes feel a headache. If he had just transmigrated, Su Xing might have found it a bit tricky. But after a period of grueling work, Su Xing couldn't say he looked down on this level of opponent, only that he disdained them. With Captain America's enhanced abilities, what could challenge Su Xing now would at least have to be S.H.I.E.L.D. Putting down the telescope, Su Xing headed directly to the camp. Inside the cave, Tony, having detached himself from the fantastical events of the past 2 days, touched the raw materials and sat on a chair. By now, Tony was very certain that he had absolutely not lost consciousness yesterday. That mysterious man was not something he had imagined. Although the man's reason made Tony really want to kick his butt hard. But Tony still confirmed his authenticity. Although he hadn't specifically kept track of time, with his superior intelligence, Tony still confirmed yesterday's date. Yesterday was neither Saturday nor Sunday. It was the Monday many people dreaded. After confirming this, Tony felt relieved. At least he wouldn't be off work today. At this very moment, he should be on his way to rescue him. Even if he didn't come, the rest of that organization would surely come to save him. Tony continuously fiddled with the raw materials in his hand, his eyes somewhat unfocused. Since he was working, then such an important person as himself must be very important in his heart. Maybe he would come over the next second? Tony Stark. Tony's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden shout. The leader entered from around the corner with a few men. Let's change locations. You guys, take the stuff. Tony Stark and Dr. Ethan were somewhat confused by the leader's command. Led by several subordinates, Tony and Dr. Ethan had their hands tied, were blindfolded, and followed behind the leader. Looking at Dr. Ethan's questioning gaze, Tony didn't respond. Following behind the leader, Tony memorized the path through the cave. Although he didn't know what exactly had happened to make the leader decide to change locations. But Tony was certain that a major incident had occurred on the terrorist side. Tony couldn't help but feel a little excited internally. Could it be that someone had come to rescue him, so they wanted to move him and hide him somewhere else? Yes, it must be like that. A barely perceptible smile unconsciously appeared on Tony's lips. The leader walked in front, his steps appearing very hurried. He indeed had the intention of moving Tony. But it wasn't, as Tony thought, out of concern that someone would come to rescue Tony. On the contrary, the leader was very confident in the camp's security, not fearing that anyone could break in. Yesterday's bomb had completely destroyed the scene. The leader was very confident that the U.S. government would not be able to determine who committed the crime based on the scene. Perhaps, the U.S. side had already confirmed Tony's death. The reason the leader wanted to move Tony was that the news of the destroyed camp made him anxious. In this region, the leader's forces often had conflicts with other simple-minded locals. If they could possess the kind of super-powerful missiles Tony demonstrated to the military, the leader's forces would be completely solidified in the local area. Therefore, the leader was very anxious for Tony to develop them quickly. At the entrance of the cave, the leader turned around and removed Tony's hood. Mr. Stark, I hope you understand your situation and don't think anyone will come to save you. Regarding our cooperation, I hope you will show full sincerity and not make things difficult for both of us. While the leader was taking Tony out of the cave, Su Xing had already approached the camp's surroundings, silently adjusting his speed. He felt a little excited thinking about changing the world line. Yellow sand swirled. Su Xing quietly waited by the main entrance, gathering intelligence. Looking at the heavily guarded terrorists at the entrance, Su Xing habitually touched the steel knife at his waist. In Su Xing's mind, the image of an agent had always been inextricably linked with that of an assassin. And as for assassins, Su Xing's strongest impression was of Assassin's Creed, which he had played in his previous life. When Su Xing was still a university student and hadn't yet been ravaged by work, he was once obsessed with that game series. If rescuing Tony were treated as a mission in a game, Su Xing would have long since rushed in with his power-up. An assassin. That means he has to be aggressive. If I kill all the enemies, then no one will know I was here, right? As for the hostages, if he can survive the chaos, that means he's amazing and his operations are meticulous. If he doesn't survive, that's just fate, and it has nothing to do with him. Su Xing licked his lips, somewhat regretfully taking his hand off the hilt of his knife. However, this was not a game after all. Furthermore, the previous stronghold's terrorists' outrageous act of shelling the armory made Su Xing even more hesitant. Although this was the main base of this group of terrorists, no one could guarantee that the personnel here would necessarily be of higher quality. If he chose to charge in directly again, there was no guarantee that the enemies wouldn't pull another stunt and just shoot Tony, which would really blow things up. He couldn't possibly report to Motherfucker Man and say, God took him, and it has nothing to do with me. Could he? If things really developed according to Su Xing's prediction, Su Xing knew with his gut that his job would be gone. The job was gone. Then what was there to talk about clocking in and out? Thinking of this, Su Xing sighed. One can only say that reality is often more absurd than fiction. He then pulled out a bug from his pocket, which he hadn't used in years and was practically growing mushrooms. Opening the system with a slight unfamiliarity, Su Xing began to gather intelligence. Dozens of meters away, the conversation of the terrorists at the gate fell into Su Xing's ears, word for word. Please, let me go. Cut the crap. Get over there now. Hey, brother, what are these bitches going to do? I don't know. The boss's intention seems to be to make weapons with Tony Stark. Shit, have you seen him? That playboy. Yes, he's standing at the cave entrance with the boss. Listening to the terrorist conversation, Su Xing took off the bug, secretly feeling fortunate. Fortunately, he didn't rush in impulsively. Otherwise, given the distance between Tony and the terrorists, it could only be attributed to a hero's halo, without any surprises. Su Xing stroked his chin, pondering. Since a direct breakthrough could easily injure Tony, he had to choose another plan. According to his observation from the hillside earlier, the terrorists in the stronghold were currently gathered around the cave, preparing to manufacture weapons. Then he had to find a way to disperse them and fish in troubled waters. What method should he use? A light bulb went off in Su Xing's mind. He had it. Besides Tony, there were many refugees in the stronghold who had also been abducted by the terrorists. Could he perhaps make a move with these refugees? Having determined his plan, Su Xing concealed his presence and slowly sneaked in. Outside the cave, the hood Tony was wearing was removed by the terrorists. Having been without light for a long time, Tony was somewhat unable to adapt to the sun's rays, and he instinctively squinted his eyes. Facing the terrorists' demand for cooperation, Tony could only respond, I promise. Having received Tony's assurance, the leader's heart relaxed considerably. Looking at Tony, a smile returned to the leader's face. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Stark. You won't lose out in this business. After speaking, the leader chuckled. Tony also put on a fake smile. The leader joyfully showed off his weapons to Tony. Honestly, Mr. Stark, as your super fans, we love you even more than those businessmen in the business world. Then he smiled and gestured for Tony to look around. Under the gaze of the terrorists in the cave, Tony also followed the leader's hand and looked at the weapons and equipment all around. His gaze swept across the entire scene, and the fake smile in Tony's eyes grew heavier and heavier. All the weapons on site, whether they were missiles placed nearby or weapons held by the terrorists, Tony knew very clearly where they came from. Stark Enterprises. Watching the terrorists brandish the weapons he had developed, Tony's lips gradually drooped, eventually disappearing. But due to the circumstances, Tony could only maintain a forced smile. As a genius who personally developed weapons, Tony was more than familiar with the smell of gunpowder. But watching the terrorists point the guns he had developed at defenseless refugees, Tony had never felt the smell of gunpowder to be so pungent. Forcing a smile, Tony felt a strong impact within him. At this moment, Tony, personally threatened by his own weapons, had transformed from a weapons dealer into a qualified hero. Tony took a deep breath. Is this what you wanted to show me? All right, buddy. You got what you wanted. Enjoying the gaze of those below him, the leader laughed heartily. At this moment, a panicked voice came from among the terrorists below. We're under attack. Upon hearing this, all the terrorists present immediately readied their guns and prepared for battle. The leader instantly put away his smile. Fuck. The attack came so quickly? Listening to the surrounding silence, the leader, however, felt something was amiss. No. If they were attacked by a hostile force, then where were the gunshots? The leader looked at the subordinate who had delivered the message and asked in a deep voice. Who attacked us? The subordinate looked terrified and said to the leader. The brothers at the gate. All of them lost their lives. The leader frowned. There were at least 3 or 4 people guarding the gate, based on his memory. Even if they were attacked, they shouldn't have been able to make a sound. Why didn't anyone in the camp notice? The leader asked, puzzled. How did you find out? The subordinate stammered, trembling. I was just about to go get the slaves, and as soon as I reached the entrance, I found the bodies of our brothers. The leader, calm, continued to ask, what about those slaves? The subordinate's face was filled with fear, as if he had seen a devil. They're all gone, not even their bodies. Tony, listening nearby, couldn't suppress his excitement. Someone who had a grudge against the terrorists and silently dealt with many armed terrorists. Most importantly, all the abducted refugees were released. Just as he had thought. It must be him. He was finally going to be rescued.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.